So we are moving on to Ben Kallos, and we are continuing with the theme of what cities can do to improve our food system. Ben Kallos is the local legislator that we all wish we had. And if you are in New York City Council District 5, he is your legislator. He is a public health advocate, and he's on the New York City Council's Progressive Caucus. He's the co-chair of the Progressive Caucus for the New York City Council. He's a leader on many good causes, including protecting New Yorkers from the use of toxic pesticides in the city's parks and open spaces, and requiring fast food marketed to children to be a little less unhealthy. And he's also supporting the green jobs recovery at this time. So Ben will tell us more about his work. And Ben, I hear that you have an adorable 2-year-old with you. So if we have the opportunity to be interrupted, I welcome it.
Thank you so very much, Alexis, Craig, Henry, Ronnie. It's an honor to share this panel, and I also appreciate. So I do have a 2-year-old and daddy daycare time. It is now my slot, so I'm going to be trying to multitask. And anyone who knows about multitasking and trying to do 2 things at once know it will be a challenge, and you will get to know my daughter well and intimately in the next 10 minutes or so. I have to start with a huge thank you to the Richmond Law Group. They provided the legal expertise, technical assistance, memorandums of law, everything we needed in trying to move forward with a ban on toxic pesticides in parks. And just we'll get into some of the slides, and if they could be pulled up, that would be amazing. But what I'll say is I first started working on the issue of toxic pesticides, not because it was something that I knew about. I learned about it from a kindergarten. I learned about it in Paula Ragavan's kindergarten class from the children. And what do you call it? It's now that I am a father. I wasn't a father at the time. We weren't even pregnant at the time. It is more important than ever. So I think when we talk about the future of the food, it's important to understand where we are in New York City right now. And that's that we're in the midst of an obesity epidemic. More than half of adults in New York are overweight, and nearly half of all elementary school children and Head Start children do not have a healthy weight. And so legislation I introduced last term, we couldn't get done this term. We did it with Speaker Corey Johnson, was Healthy Happy Meals legislation. And what it initially started with was setting specific calorie requirements around children's meals. And we had social science and medical research that found that the intervention would work. We were not able to build industry support or community support. Frankly, families wanted us to stay away from their children's meals, but we did work very closely with the American Heart Association, and something everyone could agree on is what if the meals they advertised, what if the default meal was a healthy beverage option with whatever other food items they might include. And when you talk about it, I think there was one of the best examples I saw was when you talk about a small child having a soda and thinking that they can just walk it off. In order to walk it off, they would need to walk from Times Square to City Hall. So if you know how big Manhattan is, that's a number of miles. It's not running around in the backyard or running around the house or jumping up and down as my daughter is doing. It is quite much more. So actually, this law is now in effect. The default beverage in New York City is now water, a 100% juice beverage, or milk, and that milk can be flavored. And so that is where we are on that piece. Hold on one second. Okay, interruption, first interruption. So I think that was one piece, and let's go to the next slide. In the City Council, the Mayor's Office of Food Policy was something that occurred under Bloomberg, but it was never actually official. And those of you in the food community know that the Food Policy Office actually was vacant for a large portion of this term. My daughter knows how to use my desk and takes great joy in moving it up and down. And so we actually introduced the Office of Food Policy, and I believe we passed it into law. And so now that job is in the books, and we have an amazing food policy director who is doing a lot of the work on the Good Food Purchasing Plan. And so we are so very lucky to have them. And I'm actually today, what do you call it? We were doing our grocery shopping, and as many of you know, our groceries have all gone up in price, and something seems wrong with that. So I'm actually going to be reaching out to this new office I created to say, how do we lower the price of groceries in our city? Next slide. Another key piece is I'm actually one of the largest funders of Grow NYC in the city council. Grow NYC is a quasi-governmental entity. It used to be part of the city, but now it is independent. And hold on one second. And so one of the issues is that we need to take on food deserts. And one of the places that we see food deserts, we can do green markets and also youth markets. So in my district, we have 82nd, 93rd Street, we have Roosevelt Island, we have 67th Street, and that's one of the things that local elected officials can do, which is start these green markets. We also have a fresh food box program, and that is another key thing that's kind of a hallmark. And in my district, you can actually show up at my district office starting soon, actually in June, and get your fresh food box, $14 a week, and we accept SNAP. And so I love Grow NYC and their programs. Next slide, please. One other piece that I'm trying to get done, we actually passed the study legislation to do a study on this. They've released a report, but in my district and across the city, more than half of people over 60 live on as a senior advocacy organization don't get their SNAP benefit. SNAP is still a federally funded program, and with what we are seeing in terms of the fact that farmers are literally facing the choice of pouring out milk, some of them are doing amazing things of not pouring out that milk. Hunger isn't a resource problem, it's an information problem, and a question of how do we distribute it. In my district, 91% of the seniors don't get it. So I proposed an idea called automatic benefits, and the idea is you pay a W-2, you get a 1099, you interact with the government in any way, and we analyze what programs are available for you. We get you your SNAP, we get you every other program you can get. And so small goal, solve hunger. I think it's something we can do. Next slide, please. We recently, ever since we started distributing the meals, the children's meals are not something I have much power over because of federal preemption, and unless the Richmond Law Group wants to correct me about that. But the one thing we can do is look at the meals that we're now serving to everybody. And so these are not DFT, these are not funded through Department for the Aging on the federal level, and they're actually being given to anyone and everyone who needs it, and that's important. But I've been to some of those locations, and I'm seeing chips, I'm seeing high sugar content items, and I joined with Borough President Eric Adams to say, why are we providing people in low-income communities, people in low-income communities of color? There's a diabetes crisis in this city as well. Why are we handing them candy bars and saying, here's your nutritional value? So we're working on legislation to provide regulations around city meals that we distribute ourselves, and also how we can support our nonprofit partners. Next slide. I gave you a little bit of a preview of the Roundup situation. So the city is spraying it everywhere. I learned about it from these kindergarten kids, and it has been such an uphill battle you wouldn't believe. And these kids were ahead of the World Health Organization. They were ahead of all the Monsanto lawsuits. At this point, Monsanto's paying out billions. Other countries have banned it. And so we have legislation that would say the city can't spray glyphosate and other carcinogens, and we're seeing it sprayed everywhere, and we're working with the Black Institute, who found that they're seeing it sprayed more in low-income communities of color than anywhere else. And we've also been able to show that we can have great looking parks without using pesticides. And so I remember telling folks in an interview that I look for dandelions. I look for other types of weeds that are easily identifiable before I let my daughter play on grass in New York City. And I mentioned that sometimes we like go all the way down to Battery Park because I know that they don't use pesticides there. And Battery Park was actually concerned because I referenced seeing weeds, and they said, "Did you actually see a weed in Battery Park?" And I said, "No, no, no, it was just whatever." And they're like, "You need to issue a corrective statement." So just to be clear, you can do this without weeds. There are a lot of ways to do this, and we have a lot of expertise and what have you. And ultimately, if you give me a choice between weeds and cancer for myself or my child, the answer is I will take weeds every day. It's introduction 1524. You can sign a petition at benkallos.com/petitions. We need folks to harass their local members by calling them. That's actually how we got the hearing on it. We actually had to force the health committee chair, who did not want to have a hearing on this legislation. And it would also say that you can't spray the carcinogen, this synthetic pesticides, near natural bodies of water, because as we know, it gets into the water supply. I know the Richmond Law Group can speak so much more to this than I do. Again, I rely on folks like you, your expertise, to guide me. And whether you're a kindergartner or you're Kim Richmond, I am learning. I'm just here to facilitate, give you the opportunity of having an elected official who's willing to make their office your office. And for as long as I'm an elected official, I'm term limited out, but there will be elections in 2021. But as long as I'm an elected official, you will have an advocate who will do their best to understand the science, the evidence, work with doctors and experts on amazing public health policy, and fight the biggest corporations on this planet, like Monsanto, to do the right thing and save our children and keep us all safe. So thank you. I'm gonna hop off so I can watch my daughter, but I'll come back on for Q&A.
Sounds good. Thank you, Ben. That was great.